Welcome back, everybody. Our second talk's about to start here in SEVillage. Thanks for joining us so far today. It's been a really great day. We've had a lot of fun so far. For all of you who have been to pop in here virtually with us, stay safe out in Vegas if you're there. Don't catch COVID. Okay, let's talk about our next speaker. Well, I've known John since he was way, way younger than he is now, which is kind of weird now that we work together. But and I've been friends with his dad for a long time too. And now John gets to help me out with the Innocent Lives Foundation. If you're not familiar with that, you're going to be by the end of this talk. But a little bit about John. He's got some great duties that he helps us take care of here at ILF. He helps us with basically everything. He's like here's a hat, wear it, and then here's another hat, wear that one, and then here's like a hat rack. That's what that should be his title, because it's from everything from fundraising to administrative duties to helping us with social media to whatever else we come up with as crazy ideas. And John's there doing that. He's also really skilled at public speaking. So he's going to be talking to us today a little bit about the Innocent Lives Foundation, what it is, what we do, what our mission is, and how we do it. As always, please ask your questions in the Discord there on DEFCON, and we will be happy to bring them up at the end of his speech. Same rules as before, keep it respectful and honest and nice, and we'll be more than happy to interact with you. And just one notice before we start, the Innocent Lives Foundation does help in tracking people who hurt children and who abuse children and traffic children. So just as a small warning for the speech beforehand, that some of the topics that come up when we talk about what we do could be trigger warnings for certain people. So we just like to give you that as a little warning beforehand. But let's now give our attention to John. Thanks for coming here to the SEVillage virtually, and
thank you for having me.
Hearing you.
All right. So as Chris mentioned, I'm the executive assistant to the Innocent Lives Foundation. Although I think I like the title he just gave me better. I think I'm going to start putting hat rack as my official title. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to bring that up in our next meeting. So the Innocent Lives Foundation, a beacon of light in a dark world. I love that title because it's dramatic, but it also very well describes what we do here at the Innocent Lives Foundation. Unfortunately, we do live in a dark world. However, the ILF is helping to shine a little bit of light where we can. As Chris mentioned, this is a presentation regarding the topic of child sexual abuse. The point of this conversation is to tell you more about the Innocent Lives Foundation, raise awareness, and discuss what we can do as a community, and especially as parents and guardians, to help protect our children better. However, this conversation isn't for everybody, and we don't want to emotionally damage anyone in our audience. So take this as an official trigger warning. If you would like to know more about what we do, but maybe aren't prepared for this conversation just yet, please visit us online, theinnocentlivesfoundation.org, and you'll see the same information presented there, but perhaps in a little bit of a softer manner. So let's jump right in. Who is the Innocent Lives Foundation? We are a 501c3 nonprofit, primarily funded by donations, and we have a vision. Our vision is a world where all children can live innocent lives. A world where all children can grow up without the horrors of sexual abuse. Now, we do know that this is a big goal. And unfortunately, in the world we live in, it might even seem impossible for this vision to be achieved. But I want you to think for a moment. Imagine that you are a child, a young 8, 10-year-old boy or girl, and you've just come to hate the evenings because you know every evening you are going to be assaulted. You are going to be sexually abused every day. What does that do to your life? But then on the opposite end of things, let's say one evening your attacker doesn't come by. And the next day, your attacker's nowhere to be found. And the day after, and suddenly weeks go by, months go by, and you have not been abused anymore. Your attacker has been removed from your life. You don't need to know why. You don't need to understand even what happened, but all you need to know is that your life has now been changed for the better in a massive way. So yes, we realize that this is a huge task, but if we can even save one more child, preserve one more child's innocence, we're going to do everything we can to make that happen, no matter what it takes. So that is our vision, and we accomplish this by the means of our mission. Our mission is to identify anonymous child predators and help bring them to justice. Identify anonymous. Wait a minute, doesn't that sound kind of counterintuitive? How can you identify someone if they're anonymous? Well, we use a very specialized set of skills. We have some of the best people in the world at OSINT and investigation techniques, and we're going to dig into that a little bit more as we go. But we identify those who think they are anonymous or who are hiding behind a username. Let's say, for example, there's someone out there on the internet named John Smith 145, and he's hurting children. Well, John Smith 145 thinks he's safe, hiding his real identity from the world. But that is what we are here to do. We are here to prove him wrong, to identify who he is in real life, everything we can get about him, his name, his information, his address, hand that over to law enforcement so they can do their jobs. We are a non-vigilante private predator hunting organization. Non-vigilante. So we're going to really deep dive into why that's the case in a little bit. But for now, I just want you to get this statement in mind. We are not above the law. One more time. We are not above the law. No, we work closely with law enforcement at a local, federal, and international level to accomplish what we do, but everything we do is perfectly within legal parameters. And these are identified in our guiding principles. We have 5 guiding principles here at the ILF that help us to be effective. That first one, children are our beneficiaries. So as I stated before, we are a nonprofit and we operate on donations. And as much as we love our donors, frankly, they're not our primary concern. Our primary concern is the children. Children are our beneficiaries. So what does that mean? Well, that means that every time we make a decision, we think, will this positively impact the lives of children? We ask ourselves, how will this affect children in the future when we're forming policies? Everything we do comes back to children as our beneficiaries. And that is our number 1 guiding principle. Number 2, operate above reproach. We have to. Again, we are not above the law. This is vital. We operate inside a very specific framework that's highly regulated, enforced, and monitored. Because if we were to step outside of these legal parameters, if we were to step outside of our framework that we've built with law enforcement, a predator could go free. And that is never what we want to happen. So we must operate above reproach at all times. 3, we have to protect the emotional health of our people. We have to. This is a very dark topic. Our COO, we were going over this yesterday. He said, use the word horrendous. And he's right. This is a horrendous topic. And this is something that our volunteers have to deal with every single day. So protecting the mental and emotional health of our team members is of the highest priority. And ever since our inception nearly 4 years ago, we've had what's called the wellness program. It's taken different forms throughout the years, but at its current iteration, we have a full-time therapist on staff that you are required to have regular visits with if you are a volunteer or an employee. Her name is Erin, and she is amazing. We love her. And so she actually specializes in trauma. So Erin is fantastic and is a wonderful thing for the team. It's mandatory to meet with our wellness director, Erin, monthly if you are a PIT volunteer. However, she is even available more than that if needed. So we take emotional and mental health very, very seriously here at the ILF because of what we do. 4, never educate a predator. This may seem a little odd, and you might want to wonder, well, of course, you're not going to go out and teach predators how to do their jobs. But what do we mean by this? Well, we have to ask ourselves, if before we publish any information, whether on our social media, on a blog, or in a talk like this, before we publish any information, Will this make predators harder to catch? Is the question that we're asking ourselves. Our children are our beneficiaries, and so we would never want to do anything that makes predators smarter by publishing undue information about how we do our jobs. And finally, no vigilantism. We are not vigilantes. Again, we're going to talk about this in depth as we go on, but keep that in mind. Nothing that is done at the ILF is illegal. Everything is well within legal bounds. All right, so let's take a look at this guy. His name is Bear, and I love him. He is adorable. He's a 2-year-old chocolate lab. And believe it or not, he was the world's first USB sniffing dog. Bear here was trained to sniff out media devices, SD cards, USBs, hard drives. I love the little picture of him posing with the hard drives. He's adorable, and he's really good at what he does. Here, though, is an unfortunate story of education of predators. A huge fail by law enforcement. Do you guys remember the Subway fiasco with Jared, the Subway rep who was found to have child pornography? Well, they discovered where he was hiding his child pornography by using Bear here. They brought Bear in, and he sniffed out that Jared had USBs in his walls that he was hiding his child porn on. And it led to a successful arrest, which is fantastic. But then what did they do? Well, they were so excited with this win. They were so excited with their progress with Bear that they went out and told the entire world that this is possible now, that we have USB sniffing dogs. As a matter of fact, the news clip, they talk about Bear and they say, we're going to have so many requests for this. He's going to get out there and help us solve so many cases. And he would have, had they not told everybody about him. What do you think was on all of these predator forums the next morning? How to protect your devices from USB sniffing dogs. How to protect your devices from trained media dogs. Yeah, so by announcing this, even though it's a really cool story, they nullified the effectiveness of their technique. So that's exactly what we mean by never educating a predator. That's something we are very conscientious of here at the ILF. So I mentioned OSINT before. I'm sure many of you in the audience are familiar with that, but as a broad stroke, it's open source intelligence gathering. It's the practice of gathering intelligence from publicly available sources. All right, so anything that's on the open web, if you can Google it, an OSINT investigator can find it. And OSINT is the primary means that we use to identify predators. So a little more detailed breakdown on how we do what we do. Step 1. We identify a predator. Now, this can be from our own generated leads as the team, or more and more frequently, law enforcement is coming directly to us to have assistance on a case. They'll say, hey, Innocent Lives Foundation, we need to help find who this guy is in real life. Can you help us? And we'll say, of course. So we get a case together. Then what do? Well, we hand that case off to law enforcement. One of their guys gets their hands on a keyboard, retraces our steps, and then has the information gathered themselves, and they've maintained chain of custody. Well, then what's step number 3? Step number 3 is us being proactive in education. Education is vitally important for parents and guardians, because by educating parents and guardians on how to keep their children safe, we will effectively be able to reduce the number of cases that we have to work in the future. So that's the gist of our 3-step process on how we identify child predators. So let's talk a little bit about the mission in particular. And we're going to do this through the lens of a story. This is an anonymized story that we call Baby Doe. This is a real case that the ILF worked. And it is brutal. It is gut-wrenching. We've set our trigger warning already, but I'd be remiss if I didn't repeat it, because what you're about to hear is gut-wrenching. But I want you to listen to it, and I'm going to give you a challenge. Here's the challenge. As you hear this story, you're going to have things pop up in your head. You're going to have questions that you want to ask yourself. Hang on to those. Try and keep those questions in the forefront of your mind, these gut reactions that you have. And we're going to address some of them in detail afterwards. So what happened with the Baby Doe case? Well, not long ago, several months at this point, one of our case leads discovered an online forum. This was an online forum that was dedicated to the exchange of CSAM of very young children, ages 2 and under, which is a horrible thing to even think about or even be aware exists, but that's what this forum was dedicated to. To make matters worse, there was one user who demanded our immediate attention. This user was offering to trade and distribute, and even go as far as producing new content involving his own newborn child. Well, within 2 weeks, the ILF was successfully able to identify who this new father was, was able to turn that information over to law enforcement, and now Baby Doe has a chance at leading an innocent life. That is why we do what we do, for cases like this. So you may have had some gut reactions hearing that story or some thoughts, so we're going to address some of the common ones. First, well, this only happens to other people, right? I mean, what are the odds really? How common is this? There's no way that it's going to happen to me or someone I know or care about, right? It seems really odd that the father was the predator, right? That's got to be rare. I can't imagine that that's the norm. Where did you find that form, right? That had to be one of those dark web websites. Yeah, I see on TV all the time. They get specialists in there and talk about the dark web, and that had to be where that was. Or what about CSAM? What exactly is CSAM? I mentioned it a couple times. You may not be familiar with that term. So we're going to break those down, starting with that first one. This is a very rare thing, right? I wish that was the case. But unfortunately, approximately 1 in 10 children, 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday. 10% of children will experience sexual abuse while they're still a minor. So that means, I guarantee you have crossed paths with someone who has been abused. I guarantee you know someone who has had to suffer abuse. And there's a very good chance that even someone in our audience listening right now had to suffer this horrific abuse. This is an epidemic. This is not a rarity. 10% is not a rarity. No, this is a horrible reality of the world that we live in. As a matter of fact, a 1995 study, think about that for a moment. A 1995 study. I wasn't even alive in 1995, okay? The internet, while it was around, looked nothing like it does today. It would be 10 years after this study that YouTube was launched, okay? So, a 1995 study. I wish we had more recent numbers, but this is the most recent reliable study that's been done. It tells us that one serial predator affects up to 400 children in their predatory career. 400 children. Yes, this is not a rarity, unfortunately, in the world that we live. What about this next gut reaction or thought you may have had? It seems really odd that the parent was the predator, right? When I was growing up, it was always stranger danger, right? And while that's good advice, I want you to think about this for a moment. Look at that pie chart. We have 7, 34, and 59. One of those belongs to the strangers, one belongs to an acquaintance, and one belongs to family members. Who do you think the predator is most likely? Is it a stranger? It's got to be a stranger, right? No. No, believe it or not, strangers only account for 7% of sexual abuse towards children. 59% of the time, it comes from an acquaintance or a friend of the family. And unfortunately, 34% of the time, 1/3 of the time, abuse comes from within the family. I don't give you these numbers to try and scare you, or I don't want you to start going out and second guessing all of your friends, right? That's not the point of this statistic. The point is to bring awareness to the truth. And the truth is, if your child is going to become a victim, there's a 93% chance that you already know who the predator would be. This is why education is vital. You have to be aware of, as a parent or a guardian, the warning signs. You have to know about these dangers and how you can protect your children from them. That is the startling truth. What about that next one? Where'd you find that online forum? Had to have been dark web, right? Well, actually, no. The majority of our cases happen on the open web. The same open web where I'm working from right now on Zoom. The same open web that your children go to school on and play on after school. This was a website that was hosted out in the open for all to see and to use. Very few of our cases take place on the dark web. Now, it's a great opportunity to bring attention, though, to two of our partners and tools that we use, EchoSec and Bluestone Analytics. These are excellent dark web tools that we use on a daily basis here at the Innocent Lives Foundation. And we want to bring these guys up because they have been awesome and they have helped us out a lot. So if you want to connect with either of those providers, please feel free to reach out to the ILF and we can make that happen. But again, the majority of our services and the majority of the things that we find on the open web. Now, CSAM. What is CSAM? I'm sure you're familiar with the term child pornography, but CSAM is what we use here at the Innocent Lives Foundation. Put it simply, all child pornography is CSAM, or child sexual abuse material, but not all CSAM is child pornography. Yet CSAM indicates any sort of sexual related crime against a child. Any sort of video that is produced, photograph, anything of that nature is child sexual abuse material. But we stay away from the term child pornography for two reasons. One, it's simply not as inclusive of a term as CSAM, whereas sexual abuse materials much more accurately describe what we do. In child pornography, that term pornography, unfortunately, has become linked sometimes with entertainment, and it might give the wrong impression that this is harmless. This is not harmless. This is sexual abuse materials. So that is why we use the term CSAM, and other groups like ours use the term CSAM. So let's talk a little bit about the numbers, CSAM reporting. These reports are from 2016. We're going to talk about CSAM by the numbers. 53%. 53%. The majority of CSAM that is reported is of children under the age of 10. Under the age of 10. There's a quote from Interpol there that is very impactful. It says that we see younger and younger kids. And the younger the kids are, the more violent the abuse, especially for boys. Yes, unfortunately, 2% of this material features children under the age of 2 years old. And 28% of CSAM features rape or another form of sexual torture. 84% of images and 91% of videos are newly reported materials as well. What do I mean by that? Well, these are not the same images that keep getting reported over and over and over again. These are not the same videos that keep recirculating over and over again. No, this is new content. There are predators out there actively finding new victims, actively looking for new children to victimize. So it is an epidemic, that one that continues to grow. Project Arachnid, a Canadian group, they found that there's over 5 million web pages hosting child sexual abuse materials. I'm going to be honest with you, 5 million web pages seems like a lot to even exist, let alone just 5 million websites that feature CSAM. That is a horrific number. They're finding 100,000 unique images every month, and that was back in 2017. And the next slide will illustrate why those numbers are much larger now. Take a look at this graph. Really study this for a moment. This is the growth of CSAM reported in the United States. This is not taking place, let me rephrase, this is taking place everywhere around the world. But some people have this idea that this only takes place in impoverished areas or in third world countries. That's not even close to being true. This is the amount of reported cases of CSAM in America in the last 20 years. Look at that first number, 2001. there was 421 cases reported. What happened by the year 2017? Well, the amount of reported CSAM in America shot clear over 20 million. And is that growth sustaining? Is it staying at that level? No, it's growing exponentially. 1 year later, it had more than doubled to 45 million reported accounts of CSAM in America. And in 2019, 69.1 million reported accounts of CSAM. Let me ask you something. I want you to think critically here for a second. Do you think that COVID and the lockdown has made it better or worse? Well, we don't have official numbers yet, but early reports show the trend increasing twice as fast in CSAM reported since COVID started than before. Twice as fast. Yes, the more time that we and our children are spending online, the more opportunity for these predators to have access to them and to create and publish new content. This is a horrifying chart. This is a horrifying trend to look at, but this is the truth. The numbers get worse and worse every year. The Internet Watch Foundation assessed over 130,000 pages containing images and videos of child sexual abuse. And here's something very interesting to be aware of. 29% of these web pages that they analyzed contained self-generated imagery. What do I mean self-generated imagery? It's exactly what it sounds like. This is CSAM, child sexual abuse material, child pornography that is being produced by the victim themselves. It's not hard to understand why Thorn, or as you may know it, Ashton Kutcher's group Thorn realized in 2020 that 39% of teens aged 13 to 17 say that it is totally normal to trade nude photographs and videos among their peers. Think about that for a moment. Teens, almost half of them, say that it is just a normal, everyday occurrence for nude photographs and videos of themselves to be traded around to their peers. Not hard to understand why there's a growing trend of self-generated CSAM, isn't it? So how does this happen exactly? Does someone just walk up on the street to your child and say, hey, I'm going to abuse you and I'm going to get you to create sexual abuse materials? Well, no, obviously, that's not the case. The majority of the time, it happens through a process called grooming. And this is something that I'm sure all of you have at least heard at one point in your life. Grooming is the act of a predator targeting, gaining their trust, and then unfortunately exploiting a child. We're going to spend just a few minutes talking about grooming because it is very, very important to understand. It's important to understand what it is and how it happens so you can be aware of the warning signs. Grooming is essentially a 6-step process. We're going to break those down one at a time, starting with that first one. Step 1 in grooming is a predator identifies who their victim is. They target a victim, typically one with noticeable weaknesses, such as an emotional vulnerability, and perhaps low self-confidence, or maybe they're in a poor economic situation. They see something about a child that they can exploit. Then what do? Well, they gain their trust. They obtain information about the victim. They make the victim think that they're on their side. They're their friend. The quotes here are very impactful because this is taken from a victim of grooming and the abuse that they suffered. Notice what this first quote says about trust. It says, up until this point, they being the predator, had never tried to touch me. They did not make me ever feel uncomfortable or ever feel unsafe or that they could harm me. They gain that trust with the victim. Then what happens? Well, then they fill a need. That need that they identified at the beginning, now they fill it. Perhaps that's buying their victim gifts or being an emotional shoulder that they can cry on, or perhaps providing money, drugs, and alcohol. They fill that need, and then the isolation starts. They start isolating their victims away from their family and their loved ones. Oftentimes, this involves making the parents seem like the villains, making it seem like the parents don't know what they're talking about, that they're in love, this predator and this victim. and that they need to isolate. This will often include times trying to get them alone on FaceTime or perhaps even in person to spend more time with this victim. And that's when the abuse can begin. Listen to this further quote. As I trusted them. They were my friends as I saw it. Until one night, my main perpetrator raped me, quite brutally as well, in front of a number of people. Well, does the abuse stop after the first time? Typically not. The next step, step 6, is to maintain that control. Whether it be through extorting this person, threatening to release the footage that they've already taken of them to their parents or to the public, or through any number of manipulation tactics, typically the predator will attempt to abuse their victim repeatedly. Notice that final quote there. It says, well, if I didn't go out and see them, they were going to get my mom and are going to rape her. What a horrific experience this young person had to go through. And yet this is happening every single day all around us. It's important to note too, when it comes to grooming, that oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, the predator will try to groom the parent as well. Why? Well, it just makes their lives easier. If they can gain the trust of the child and the parent, they're going to have much easier access to exploit their victim. So being aware of these steps, of these signs of grooming, are very important as a parent or a guardian. And you can look up that reference in slaverynow.org to get more information on the particulars of grooming and how it presents. So again, I want you to think for yourselves, think critically. Do you think it's easier and easier for predators to gain access to children these days with the internet? Well, of course it is. As a matter of fact, 1 in 3 internet users is a child. As predators have unprecedented access to new victims now because of the internet. The internet is great in a lot of ways. The internet's allowing us to talk and have this conversation right now, but it also presents a whole new wave of dangers that parents and guardians aren't aware of. And that's why the Innocent Lives Foundation and their education, our education, is so important in this digital world. So what about living with CSAM? What happens after? Let's say you are fortunate and your predator gets taken out of your life. Let's say they're behind bars and they can't hurt you anymore. Is that the end of the abuse for you? Well, unfortunately, no, that's just not the case. You now have to find a way to live your life after you've been a victim. This is a very interesting report, and these numbers I'm going to share with you. This is a report done in Canada that has a relatively small focus group. And the reason for that is because this is the first generation of children that have grown up and become adults living in this digital world. So they have a focus group of these poor children that had been abused and had CSAM created of them. And they're asking them to reflect on it and its effects into their adult life. Let's break down some of these numbers. 80% of this focus group had thought about suicide as an adult. 60% had attempted suicide. 69% of these individuals worry. They worry about being recognized from this child sexual abuse material that was created of them as a child. And 30% of them say they have been recognized from their CSAM. Wow. Take a step back and think about this. We've talked about a lot of numbers, and it can be easy to just get lost in these numbers. These aren't just numbers. These are people. These are children and adults. These are their lives we're talking about here. Think about the effect that this information you've just learned would have on society in the future. Think about this for a moment. We discussed earlier 1 in 10 children will be abused before the age of 18. That is a lot of children that are becoming victims every single day. And this is the effect that victimization is having as they grow up. What sort of an effect would we have would this have on society with all of these individuals contemplating and attempting suicide? And put yourself in their shoes for a moment. Imagine having to walk into an interview. Imagine going on a first date, or perhaps going home with your date to meet their parents and having to worry every step of the way, am I going to be recognized from my CSAM? That must be a horrible thought to even have to have. And yet, that is the reality. All right, take a deep breath. Now what? Did I drag you here for 45 minutes to depress you? No, that was not the point of this conversation. The point of the conversation is that, yes, this is a dark world, but the Innocent Lives Foundation is a beacon of light. There's a silver lining. We are doing something about it. We're going to talk about how successful the ILF has been in our mission. September 1st, coming up here in just a few weeks, is our 4th anniversary, which we're very excited about. But in just 4 years, we have worked nearly 400 cases. And pay attention to that second number. 303 cases. 303 cases have been sent and accepted by law enforcement. That is an outstanding success rate and an outstanding acceptance rate. 303 plus cases have been sent to law enforcement. And remember the statistic from earlier? One of these guys, one of these predators can affect up to 400 children. These are hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of children's lives that have been improved because of the Innocent Lives Foundation. We are currently working on 30 active cases and have been featured in over 150 news articles and reports. So we are being very effective. And part of the reason we're so effective is because we're not vigilantes. The little slide over always kills me. So I always forget it's there, and then I think I'm going to click on to the next slide, and it's just Batman's face getting covered up. No, we are not Batman. Vigilantism doesn't work. What is vigilantism? Well, it's when an individual uses their own perception of right and wrong to try and enact their own justice outside the realms of the judicial system. Why is this so bad for effectively getting predators off the streets? Because many of these people do have good intentions, and we're all on the same team. We want to see these guys behind bars. But if you're not working within the realms of law enforcement, you can actually be hurting law enforcement. Vigilante pedophile hunting has the potential to minimize the legal action that can be taken against these pedophiles, while at the same time, it can create very severe consequences for their victims. If someone is publicly shamed and outed as being a pedophile or someone who's harming children, and he does have access to a child at home, do you think that this embarrassment, this shame, and all of this anger and rage that he now has after being exposed is going to benefit that child in any way? Absolutely not. No, our job is to get these guys off the streets effectively. Our job is to make sure they get put behind bars. And the only way to do that is to work within the realms of the law. You have to have enough evidence to prove guilt. And unfortunately, again, while they may be well-intentioned, many of these vigilante groups, the evidence they gather doesn't even come close to meeting the standards of law enforcement. That's a brief overview of why we are aggressively anti-vigilante. But as a matter of fact, 2019 DEFCON, our COO, Shane McCombs, gave a talk that goes into this topic in much more depth, and it's very interesting. If you have the time, it's up on our YouTube channel, and you can get it from that QR code there. So that's what we do, how we do it, and we're doing it very effectively. But there's that third step as well, which is education. We have to actively educate parents and guardians so that they can protect their children, because we can't protect every child in the world. Not yet, at least. We're just not there yet. But parents and guardians are in the best situation to be able to. And so we educate them through various means. On our website, we have a blog that we update regularly, including guides to online safety, how to secure your children's devices, and such as how to avoid Zoom bombing, things like that. We've published videos. We have a great one up on our YouTube called Knowledge for Parents. It's about 15 minutes long. and it explains why CSAM is so important and how you can start to protect your children. It's a fantastic video to watch yourself if you have children, or to send to those that do. But possibly the most effective method of protecting your children is talking to them. You have to have age-appropriate conversations with your children if you want to protect them effectively. And that can be difficult. I mean, this is dark, intense stuff. There's a reason we had a trigger warning at the beginning of this presentation. This is not an easy conversation to have with your children. But understanding how to communicate can make it easier. One of our board members, Robin Dreek, is fantastic. And he's the former head of the FBI's Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program. That is a mouthful of a title. Essentially, he flipped spies for the FBI. Pretty cool, huh? And if you're familiar with Criminal Minds, which I'm a big fan of, and I'm sure many of our listeners are, the BAU is the fictional department. Robin's is the real department. He was the real life BAU. So really, really fascinating guy, and we are very lucky to have him as one of our board members. Yes, Robin is very actively involved in the Innocent Lives Foundation, and he has this amazing framework for parents, or for anyone really, to communicate more effectively. It's called the trust method. It's talking, building relationships, understanding, developing stability, and then teaching. And he breaks all of this down on his website, peopleformula.com, and we have an excellent blog post about it linked there at the bottom on our website. Trust, Robin Dreek's rules for keeping kids safe online. So yes, these are very difficult conversations to have, but by understanding how to communicate effectively, you can protect your children online. We've also produced a mini documentary which depicts some of the abuse that we are trying to stop from happening again. It tells the story of Chloe. There's a link to the blog post there. I encourage you, when you have a moment, to go watch it, but I'm going to warn you, be emotionally prepared for it. It is a very difficult video to watch, but I think it's an important one for everyone to see. You get to hear from Chloe, this young girl who unfortunately was groomed and ultimately raped. You get to hear her story and how she warns other children her age against the signs of grooming. She is an incredibly brave young woman who is now actively trying to have speaking engagements to help teach these lessons to others. So we were honored to be able to help tell her story. So please, when you have the time, watch that mini documentary. All right, so you've heard about who we are, what we do, how we do it, how effective we've been. Now what? How can you get involved? One of our volunteers, he said it beautifully, and I'm just going to shamelessly rip his quote from him. He said, once he found out that this was as big of a problem as it was, and once he found out that the ILF existed and that they were doing something about it, he said, I consider it a moral obligation to get involved and do my part. I don't think I can say it better than that. I feel exactly the same way. It's a moral obligation, and I think it's something that all of us have to ask ourselves, can I help in any way? Well, there are ways to help. There's 4 key ways that you can get involved. You can follow us, keep up with us on social media. We're going to have all of our social media links listed on our last slide. So please give us a follow. And then you can get involved by hosting a fundraiser. I'm going to show you the link in just a moment here, but we actually have a peer-to-peer campaign page working now, where if you've got an event or if you want to try and fundraise for us, you can do so. You can always make a gift yourself and make a donation. Again, we are primarily funded through donations. And as you can imagine, if you're in the InfoSec world, you know how expensive a lot of our technology and resources can be. So any donation is appreciated. And we also have merchandise available if you want to support us and rep us like a human billboard. We've got some really cool ILF stuff available for sale as well. And of course, the proceeds benefit our mission. What about volunteering? Because we're a 95% volunteer organization. We are very, very grateful to our volunteers because they make everything possible. So what's involved if you want to become a volunteer of the ILF? Well, there's a minimum of 3 interviews, deep background checks, and you need to have the availability and the ability to do this job. What do we mean by that? Well, again, what was our first guiding principle? Children are our beneficiaries. Children's lives are at stake here, guys. We need to make sure every volunteer we bring on board is fully qualified. We have a very limited number of spots that we can accept simply due to financial reasons. So it is our obligation to make sure that every volunteer spot we fill is the best person for the job. And unfortunately, that's just the truth. So you need to have the availability and the technical ability to do the job. You also need to have the emotional ability to handle it. We've had some very talented people approach us and want to do and get involved and do everything they can to help. But once they realized the magnitude and the emotional weight that it was going to take, they humbly stepped back and said, I'm sorry, I just can't handle it. And that's okay. That's totally okay. That's why we have the wellness program. We never want to emotionally damage any of our volunteers, but it's an important thing to consider that you have the emotional bandwidth for it as well. If you would like to volunteer, please go to our website and you'll find the volunteer form there under the Get Involved page, and you can send in your application. We are always looking for more qualified volunteers to do this. Here's the link to our peer-to-peer fundraising page if you want to check that out and host a personal peer-to-peer fundraiser of your own. And finally, of course, there's the link to our donation page. You can scan with the QR or go to our website, innocentlivesfoundation.org/donate. If you're not in a position to donate, here's a really cool thing. You can make Amazon donate for you. They've got way too much money, so send it our way. If you go to Amazon Smile, you can set us as your organization of choice. And then what's really cool is Amazon will donate a portion of your purchases to the Innocent Lives Foundation. It doesn't cost you a thing, but you can find it there at Amazon Smile. As well as if you do decide to make a donation, we integrate with double the donation. You'd be surprised. Many of your employers will match your donation to a nonprofit of your choice. So it's worth checking into to see if your employer does, because you may be able to double the impact of your donation without having to donate any more than you were planning. So that is who we are. That is the Innocent Lives Foundation in a nutshell. Here's our social medias. Go give us a follow, and please keep up with us. And now I am very excited to hear from you guys and hear some of your questions.
Awesome job, John. Thank you so much for that and for all the information and presenting it in a very responsible way. So thanks for that, man. We have a couple questions for you. Yeah, no, we're really happy to have you talking on this. So this one, the person asking said they know it's new, so if you're not familiar with it, that's fine. But do you have any thoughts on Apple's new CSAM efforts?
That is a great question that I know nothing about. So
okay, so
that's going to have to be a pass.
And I don't either. So we'll have to look into it as an organization, and then we can give some opinion on that. But thank you for asking that. Here's another one. Many CSAM organizations like NCMEC, ICAC have mandatory requirements for a psych evaluation due to the really disturbing nature of the content. Does your organization do that?
So great question. And also great organizations. We love those guys. We don't have a mandatory psych evaluation per se. However, as part of our wellness program, one of those 3 interviews that I mentioned, they're prerequisite interviews if you want to volunteer, you have to sit down for a wellness interview with Aaron. So it's not an official, I guess we shouldn't call it a psych evaluation, but yes, there is a mental health evaluation conducted by Aaron before you can join the team. And what's really cool about that is Shane and Chris are also responsible for choosing our volunteers, but Aaron has veto power over them. If Aaron says, hey, this guy's great and super qualified, and I know we all love him, but we're going to damage him with the content, she has veto power to make sure that that doesn't happen.
And I'll add one thing to that is that everyone who works in predator identification has to see Erin once a month. So even though they may not be labeled evaluations, they are in a sense, because if she notices that someone's stress level is too high, or there's just things going on in their life, she'll recommend that they take a break or they take some time off from the work to keep them mentally safe.
Yeah, Chris meets with her frequently to discuss the pineapple pizza harassment.
I do. It's a big problem in my life, and it causes me severe depression. So,
It never ceases to amaze me how much that keeps coming up, and
everywhere.
I love it. I love it.
Here's another question. What are the basic technical skills that your organization may want for volunteers?
Great question. So primarily, we're looking for individuals that conduct OSINT at a high level on their day-to-day lives and their personal jobs. We're really looking for the most qualified people and OSINT professionals out there. There are other needs as well, such as like infrastructure needs, being excellent with AWS and programming skills. So if you have anything along that range, please let us know. On the education side, we're also looking for individuals to help us boost our social media. So if you're just a social media wizard or guru, we're looking for that on our education side as well.
Excellent. And another question. Do you find that a lot of forms containing CSAM are visible without verification? I was under the impression a lot of those networks required you to vet yourself prior to being accepted to their sharing circles.
So that's a great question that, frankly, I'm just not qualified to answer.
If you're okay with it,
input.
Yeah, I can answer it if you're okay with it. I didn't want to barge in on your.
No, please do.
So you're right that back in the day there was a large need, or the way that they ran is that you had to prove that you were like them. But we have found that there's an increasing number of forums on the dark web that share this with very little verification. They feel that their ability to remain anonymous saves them from needing to verify if you're a Fed or not. On the open web, we also found that what they're doing is they're hiding behind laws like, in this country, child erotica. Believe it or not, this is ridiculous. Child erotica is not illegal. So they hide behind that by posting images of child erotica with links to drop boxes or other folders, online folders that then contain CSAM material. So they're using these kinds of things like in Pastebin, dropping these links and things like that to pass this around and no longer requiring verification. So there are still some that do require verification, and those that require verification are usually where they are chatting and talking and getting to know each other more. But just the forums where they're trading in this garbage, sometimes they don't require it anymore, as disturbing as that is.
Yeah.
Let's see, there seems like another person asking a question, so we'll just give it a second to see if any more come in. And personally, I want to say thank you for all of you who stuck around. I know it's a hard topic, so it's somebody named. Are you in the Discord, John?
I'm not. No.
Okay, so listen, Hacker Factor. He's not in the Discord. Can you? Is your email up here, or some way for them to contact you? You have someone that wants to talk to you.
Yeah, please send an email directly to me at john.m. That's john.m at innocentlivesfoundation.org. John.m at innocentlivesfoundation.org. You can find information on the About Us too. You need to grab that. But john.m at innocentlivesfoundation.org, and I will get back to you.
I'm going to drop that into the chat for any of you who were asking, and that's how you can get a hold of John. So now someone's asking, so the trade is mostly open, shared, rather than like-minded individuals engaging with each other? No, there are like-minded individuals engaging with each other, but whereas before they usually made you post a picture to prove that you were like them, now they're just sharing that content in forums where like-minded people are getting together. So it's just not as strict as it used to be when people were afraid of not being anonymous.
Yeah, and you think of that too with like that chart we saw earlier in the presentation. It's just exploding. it's growing so exponentially that you'll find different rules in different places with these groups, but it's just there's so much of it getting produced now in a manner of ways.
Last question I see here. Can you still set up a personal birthday fundraiser on Facebook?
Yes, absolutely, you can. We have our own peer-to-peer page now, which is just kind of for general use. Facebook still works great. We still get integrated with them. As a matter of fact, if you go to that website, ilfmain.fundraise.org, that was linked before, and you create a peer-to-peer fundraising account there, you can link that to your Facebook fundraiser. So you can have both. So if you wanted to have a general link that everybody can go and contribute to outside of your friends that are on Facebook, you can link that in with a Facebook fundraiser and do both.
Awesome. Again, John, I can't thank you enough for bringing some light to ILF and helping people become aware of what we're doing. And it looks like you're going to have a few people reaching out to you. So
sounds great. Thank you.